Welcome to today's episode of the Psychedelic Mom podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Carlin, and I'm here today with Deanne Adamson. Deanne, you are the CEO and founder of Being True to You, a global transformational coaching platform that amazing. You must have had a crystal ball at some point to figure that psychedelics and earth medicines were going to have such an impact at this time in history. And you have masters in mental health counseling and extensive knowledge in addiction recovery and psychospiritual transformation. And it seems like your mission is really to help people transform their lives. So as someone who took the Being True to You coaching, your training program, I know how intensive it is. But for someone else who has never heard of Being True to You, you have two prongs to your business model. Can you tell us a little bit about the coaching side as well as the training that you do?
Yeah, thank you, Michaela, for having me on the show. I would love to talk about our work with Being True to You. I'm the founder of Being True to You. It's a company I started in 2010. I had no idea really what it would become. Initially, I started it to work with teenagers, help them find their passion, purpose, and mission in life. And that didn't work so well because teens weren't as excited to work on themselves and do this like inner child work, being that they were like still very young. And so I ended up getting this opportunity to go down into Mexico and meet the Ibogaine community and see what they were doing through their detox program, detoxing people from different kinds of addictions using this really powerful entheogenic plant medicine called Ibogaine, which is derived from iboga. And I couldn't believe what I saw. I mean, honestly, I was a mental health counselor formally. I'm not anymore. I left that profession. And what I saw really tipped the whole process of mental health healing and emotional healing and spiritual healing on its head as I watched what was happening with these treatments. And so what I did was I ended up building an aftercare program for these Ibogaine centers. And then I ended up building a preparation program as well, because what we saw was that these experiences are so powerful and so profound. But if you're not preparing yourself and integrating afterward, a lot of times the results are just fleeting and don't last very long. And so I built a whole company based on that discovery, doing preparation and integration coaching initially for Ibogaine clinics and then other psychedelic clinics and then other kinds of treatment clinics and wellness clinics. And now we do a lot of work with ketamine clinics. That really grew very fast. So about a decade ago, I had to start hiring my friends that were counselors and coaches and saying, I need help. I have so many clients. There's so many people signing. People are signing even for future coaching packages when they're not even due because they just hadn't discovered anything like this before, specifically in like the addiction recovery line of work. And so I started a training program. They had said to me, you need to build a training, Deanne. We don't know what to do. And I said, well, you're professional counselors. You trained me. You know what to do. And they said, no, this is different. This is very different than our training. We actually don't know what to do. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. So 10 years ago, I built the first edition coach training program that we're known for now. We've trained people all over the world, from top professionals to beginning students. And we've had a lot of other instructors and senior coaches come in and help us build the training. So we really have something quite comprehensive and full spectrum as far as training goes. Then we started getting into training retreats as well. So we train retreats and their staff and sitters and hospitality and space holding and really what to do in every situation. So yeah, there's a few aspects to our company, like you said, from the coaching side of it, coaching individuals and families through the transformational process or through the integration process if they're using specific transformational tools such as psychedelic therapies. And then we offer the training and certification to coaches, to clinics, to sitters, to staff. We have kind of different arrangements with different programs because there's different kinds of needs.
Wow. I mean, so amazing, really. When you talked about the Ibogaine clinic and what you saw that really turned for you the mental health idea of healing on its head, what were you seeing in those days of using Ibogaine for addiction recovery?
I mean, in a nutshell, is kind of this thinking, once an addict, always an addict. And the addiction recovery process would be very arduous. It would be very hard. It would be very daunting. And it would cost a lot of money and really tear families apart in the process of trying to save someone going down with addiction. And then what I saw was people coming out of it in 24 hours. And not only were they coming out of the cravings and the withdrawals in 24 hours, they were actually reconnecting with their value system and what was most important in life, and sort of getting a life review in this experience to see where things went wrong in their life and what were the contributing factors and core issues underneath addiction to really solve things at the root. In conventional healthcare, there's this thinking of like, okay, well, once you're an addict, you're always an addict. So now we just need to move into harm reduction and do the best we can with you. And that's where, medications like Suboxone and Methadone have hit the market. Basically you're telling the addict, I don't really believe that you can get sober and live a normal life, but we can switch you from street drugs to pharmaceutical drugs so that it's more standardized day by day, and you're not getting all the extra toxicity and you can't overdose on these things. And so it'll be better, even though it's not necessarily better in a lot of people's opinions. So what I saw was that it is possible to transcend addiction. And what I saw even deeper is that that's the point. I think that's the point of addiction. Addiction pulls us into the material world so far that we lose ourselves, that the recovery process is coming back into your true self. And everyone I've ever met that's been through that process says, I don't regret my addiction now. Before I did. Before I thought this was an unfortunate circumstance. I hated myself and I didn't even want to live anymore because of the decisions I had made in my life and all the people I had hurt. But then when they discover the transformational recovery process, they say, oh, now I get to actually use the addiction and all of the sort of self-destruction and destruction in my life that I created as a launching pad to now put everything together and actually go further in life. So what people are seeing is that had I not had that addiction, I don't think I would have cultivated to the level of self-awareness and personal growth and just passion to help other people had I not had it. And so what I saw was that maybe addiction isn't this unfortunate circumstance that we need to focus on mitigating and treating. Maybe it's something that we can say, hey, okay, I went down this journey of addiction and I didn't know what I was getting into. And yes, it took me away from my true self and everything that was important to me and, brought me to the brink of death and really questioning why I'm here as a human. However, the exact same process of recovery from addiction is the same process as personal spiritual cultivation. And so when a person gets on that journey, they can go even higher than before, and they can make the whole addiction story with them and their family and community worth it for everyone if they do it right. That kind of
transformation. And the part of being true to you that's so fascinating too is that psycho-spiritual transformation. How did you kind of come up with this process? Were there guiding principles in working with people with addiction, noticing that the psycho-spiritual was really an aspect to any transformation?
Yeah, I think there was a few things that came together. I mean, one, I had my own conversion experience out of 14 years of alcohol, drinking heavily. I never considered myself an alcoholic because I could hide amongst them very well. And I would say more of like a social alcoholic at that. And I didn't, ever think I needed to go to treatment or things like that, but I knew I'm spending way too much time and money in my younger years dedicated to drinking and popularity and having fun, and this isn't what life is about. And so I kind of had that knowing, and one day I had this conversion experience, this very divine experience, of which I was given the opportunity in the moment to make an oath to sobriety from alcohol forever, and the desire would be forever removed. And so I said yes. There's a whole story that goes with that. And so that taught me a lot right there of like, okay, what happened? How did I get to that point where I just transcended the desire? And one day I was just like, I don't want this. And I started hearing stories from other people too that were saying the same thing. And then I was watching people go into psychedelic therapies and having like this conversion experience. So I started to study that. How do we get to that point in our life when we're just done with something? I started to look at heartbreaks, for instance. Somebody has a heartbreak, they can't get over their past ex for so long, and then one day they just wake up and they say, I'm done. I don't miss that person anymore and I'm ready to move on. So I started to look at what is that experience? And what I realized is that there's a transformational process that's happening underneath before that happens, because I looked back and I thought, gosh, I had graduated with my master's in counseling, and I had been reading a lot of books. I wanted to leave counseling and start my own business. I wanted to help in a bigger way. I started going to seminars. I started getting in the personal development community and just like learning about the power of authenticity and vulnerability and just speaking about what's really going on and like just working on yourself. And I think that process of self-discovery, self-awareness, self-reflection, self-improvement, all of that sort of set the stage to broaden my consciousness to just say, gosh, I think there's more in life. And one of the biggest things that puts that shield over your growth is going to be substance addictions and attachments to substances, right? It's not just alcohol, it's a bunch of different things. And so yeah, that was part of it. And then the other part is just looking at characteristics and how the thoughts in our brain and the characteristics in our personality affect our daily outcomes. And so we started to see through psychedelic therapies that people were going within and fine-tuning their own psychological makeup and their own behaviors and their own character and different traits. And we saw that the more fine-tuning that a person does on themselves, what we're doing is we're transforming dark to light. We're transforming fear into faith. We're transforming anger into forgiveness. We're transforming like insecurity to finding security within ourselves. And I started to see there's this transformation that's happening bit by bit. And when we can transform those little pieces, actually, then we're able to transform something bigger. So if you have something like chronic addiction, depression, anxiety, insomnia, unresolved traumatic states that are affecting your life, there's all kinds of different things. It seems like everyone has that one condition in life that is just a little bit harder than all the others to get over. And, what we saw is that you can't just tackle that mountain from the top. It's like you have to do it bit by bit. And when you do that, when you break apart depression and you say, okay, what are all the factors here? And that's what psychedelics do, right? They just like break it apart. And so you get to say like, what's under my addiction, my depression, my anxiety? And you're like, oh my God, there's like 100 different things I could work on. And so that's what we do in the coaching relationship. We say, okay, let's see, what do you got today? What piece are we going to tackle today? And we just start tackling it, whether it's making amends with people, resolving conflicts, cleaning up unfinished business. Maybe I started something, and maybe I've started 10 projects. I haven't finished any of them. It's weighing on me. Well, let's finish one. Let's finish a project. Maybe it's cleaning up our mind of doubts and fears and negative thoughts. Maybe it's cleaning up our judgment toward others and just starting to like have compassion for others and appreciate them. And what we see when you go through all these little pieces is that the burdens on the human mind and body and soul become lighter. And when things become lighter, our depression starts to lift, our anxiety starts to lift, our addictive behaviors start to lift, because we're not weighted down by all of that stuff. So to me, that's the transformational process. Is there is no external solution to our suffering. There's no quick fix. You can't buy your way out of things like addiction and chronic depression, but you can do the work to clean up all the little stuff that's underneath. And when you do that, you're transforming your mindset and your behaviors, your lifestyle one step at a time, and it makes it a lot easier then to address that bigger condition.
Also, you were kind of at the intersectionality of psychedelics and this transformation kind of early on, in particular with addiction, but also in the psycho-spiritual, in particular in the West. I mean, probably in indigenous cultures, there is a form of preparation and integration. But in our Western model, who came up with integration and preparation and all of this? Were you at that time the visionaries for this entire Western model for integration and preparation and integration?
It seems like that. Like you said, I think people around the world and different cultures around the world have their own form of preparation and integration as they go into indigenous plant medicine ceremonies. I think it's really built into their culture. And then you start bringing plant medicine ceremonies into the West, And we don't necessarily have that structure set up in our society. We're a little bit different. We really rely on the addiction phenomena. Like if we have suffering, if we have pain, discomfort, we're like, where's the external fix? What can I go to? Where's the magic pill? Anything to distract me. And so I think our culture was a little bit harder for us because we didn't have that structure set up. So when people in the West started doing psychedelics, at first there's this huge surge of excitement and, oh my gosh, we found the solution. It's going to save the world. This is so exciting. Let's give it to everybody. And then we start giving it to everybody and we realize, they're falling back into their suffering. They're having like really highs and big successes and then really big lows. So what's happening here? And then we also saw a lot of friction and division around the medicines as well. So even if you do have a good community, you start doing psychedelics, then the community itself is like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know how to hold space for this. I don't know if I could trust this. It doesn't seem that it's going to stick. And so it is something that we have to create in the West, is to look at, what is preparation and integration? Because in other cultures, they're like, what are you talking about? We don't need to do that. We already do that. And so when I do not know of a company that started doing this before we did. In 2010, when I started doing aftercare integration, I was like, wow, this is so exciting. And then I heard some people in the community talking about aftercare and, but then I kind of realized, wow, we could be doing preparation and integration. And then I looked at the bigger sphere and I thought, no one's doing preparation and integration. We don't have prep and integration around healthcare models, around addiction rehab models, around different wellness clinics. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't individuals doing it. I would say we were the first company to really brand it and come in with a bunch of coaches and create a business model out of it and really speak to it. But, who's to say like who really started talking about it first? But I can say we're the first company that I know of in the psychedelic integration coaching space who has stepped in and really built out this model for preparation and integration.
How do you prepare somebody for a journey? Do you have a model that you train your coaches to support those that are coming in for that kind of preparation and integration? What is that model that you used and created?
Yeah, we definitely have a model that we share with our coaches, and our coaches, they are contractors, so they can add to it what they see fit. But we give the foundational pieces of what is preparation, what is integration, what are the foundational elements that you want to cover when you're talking about preparation. It can be different for different medicines and it can be different for different people. But, if you were to give an overview, you want to do, mental prep, emotional prep, physical prep, lifestyle, relationship prep, and maybe even financial prep and spiritual prep. So, you think about it in those general categories and then you say, okay, what's in each category? If you're looking at mental prep, okay, well, we want to start observing the contents of the mind. I mean, for somebody who's never really tuned into any kind of like personal growth type work, and they take a psychedelic, it can be a really jarring experience to all of a sudden tune into what's going on in here. And so that's one of the first things you want to do is say, okay, let's observe what's going on in your mental activity on a daily basis. Because when you step into the work, you're going to be ready to go when your mind opens up and all of a sudden you're, seeing eye to eye, face to face, like all this stuff that's going on. It won't be as jarring and there won't be as much resistance that comes up to it. So we start looking at, self-defeating beliefs and thoughts. We start looking at that like inner critic that's always judging ourselves and beating us up. We start looking at judgments toward other people. We start looking at how we problem solve. If a conflict comes up, are we blaming someone else or are we looking within and taking responsibility? So all of that mental matter and drawing awareness to it is really important before you go into an experience. In the people who've gone into these experiences who've had psychotic breaks or huge meltdowns or just really difficult, bad experiences, oftentimes they weren't really in touch with what's going on in here. And so that's one piece of it. If you're going to talk about, emotional prep, that might be looking at the heart. Is my heart open? Is it closed? What causes it to expand? What causes it to extract? What's my emotional life like? What's my relationship to my emotions? And again, tuning into all of this to see where it might be blocked and where my work might be. Physical prep could be things like cleansing the body. You really want to cleanse the body as much as you can before these journeys. and it's different for everyone, you know. So some people it's cleansing it of sugar and fast foods and unhealthy foods. Someone else might be cleansing it of substances or pharmaceuticals. Someone else, it might be cleansing it of pornography or movies or screens. There's just like a lot of stuff. Someone else might be cleansing it of all the drama in a person's life. And a little bit of cardio, stretching, you know, just like healthy activity is really good, especially if you go into these really big entheogenic experiences that are going to have like more of an effect on the heart. It's good to go in feeling your best if possible, because if you go in with a lot of gunk in your body, then that's where you're going to be. You're going to be throwing up and going to the bathroom, and you're just going to be sweating that out the whole time. And you don't really get to go deeper. And that's why you'll see people doing like multiple series with some of these plant medicines, because people have so many layers of gunk on the surface that's like, got to get through all of that. Then you have like relationship prep, which is important. It's important to tell somebody what you're doing. You don't have to tell everyone, but it's good to tell your significant other, maybe your parent, maybe your best friend, maybe a counselor, someone that you trust, if not a few people. And you tell them, here's what I'm doing. Here's my intention for doing it. I think this is what really sets the stage for a therapeutic experience. And it also gives you a support system so that when you come out, you can go back to them and talk to them about what you experienced, what you went through, and they'll support you. If you don't tell anyone till after, then when you go to tell people, I had this really big experience, I want to tell you about it, or I'm really struggling after this experience and I need help, no one's going to be able to get over the fact of like you doing the medicine. They're going to be like, what did you do? And why did you do this? And what were you thinking? And they're not going to be able to support you because they're still in shock and awe that you did this experience. And so it's important and really helpful and beneficial to communicate with other people about what you're doing, and maybe even have a community of people that do these things so that you have someone to talk to afterward. You have accountability, you have support. And then spiritual prep is a big thing too. And that's just learning to go within and be still and be quiet and listen. And that's really hard for people. I would say that's the hardest thing. So there's different kinds of recommendations the coaches will make. Maybe they'll say, you know, why don't you try 5-minute meditation or some breath work, or just sitting on a park bench, you know, in the shade, like looking up at the sun, maybe some gardening, anything that can just help a person start to shed off all the static and chaos and drama and stress that's just like in our energy field all the time. Because that's the kind of stuff that's going to fight you when you go into the psychedelic experience. And that's where you're going to feel like ungrounded and maybe like a little bit uneasy, is because there's like this conflict between all this stuff in your energy field. And so if we can sort of let it go, and that is really the practice, I think, through psychedelic therapies and coaching and all of it, is like figuring out what's here, letting it go, and practicing letting it go. So when people are like, oh, what if I can't handle myself in the experience? It's like, well, let's practice. You don't have to do a psychedelic to practice. I mean, one of my good friends, Dr. Dan Engel, he always says, you know, go sit in a float tank for an hour and see if you can handle it. If you can't handle yourself in a float tank, you're not going to be able to handle yourself in a psychedelic experience. And so then you practice. You go to float tank every week. You go to yoga class, you go outside, you get into nature, all of these things, getting still and silent and going within and not fearing the mind. Because that's what happens. People are afraid to be alone. That's why they're always listening to the radio, always have the TV playing, always talking on the phone, always have something going, because it's scary to just be alone with ourselves. And really, that's the hardest thing about going into these experiences. So when you can get over that, then you're going to go into these experiences excited. You know, you're going to set intentions. You're going to know your why. You're going to go in. You're going to say, I have so much good stuff to work on. And yes, it's dark and it's ugly and it's difficult, but I'm so excited because I'm in touch with it and I'm ready. So those are some of the general areas of preparation. And yeah, we have templates we give our coaches, and it's a little bit different for, you know, different medicines and experiences.
I remember going through the program and thinking that, number one, it was pretty intense in the sense of like all the things that you were touching on. There was all the information about psychedelics, and knowing what you just said right there, it's going to be a little different for each psychedelic. What makes for a good coach, and what is the coaching training like that you've put together to support people that are wanting to do that deep kind of change for themselves, that deep transformational work? What makes a good coach?
It's such a good question, Michaela, and thanks for asking it, because we have all kinds of coaches come into our program from all over the world, all different, levels of society. And so it's something that I tune into quite a bit, is what makes a good coach. And not everybody has to be the same. What makes a good coach is being yourself, right? And so there's everybody has their own audience that they can help, different than anyone else. So it's really about finding your own niche and your own area of interest, your own natural gifts and talents, and honing in on those things and figuring out, who can I help better than anyone else? What is my audience, and connecting with that audience, and then identifying what is that audience going through? What are they missing? What are they needing? What are they lacking? And how can I support them? Where do they want to go? And how can I create a system in a coaching platform to help them get from A to B? So I think finding that right positioning with the right audience is really important, because if we just want to be a coach to everybody, I think it's a little bit hard, because you might not relate to everyone. So I would say anybody at any level, whether you're just starting out, with your career, whether you've had a career for a while, there's exercises that we do and can teach to tap into, who am I? What are the unique attributes that I possess? And what audience do I relate to that I can understand and I can help? On top of that, when you're looking at what makes a good coach, it's going to be, character, communication, and, credentials are the three that I say, but that's really practice and training, right? So the first thing that we really look at and we notice is character. And as I was saying earlier, the people who work on all those little things under the surface, the judgments, the fears, the anger, all of those things, like the lack of reliability, the lack of integrity, the dishonesty, the showing off, the competitive mentality, the jealousy, just the drama, like all of that stuff, you can't hide it in the coaching conversation. You might think like, I'm just going to be perfect. But if you have all of that stuff, you're going to have a chip on your shoulder, and you're going to be a little bit edgy, and you're going to be easily triggered in the conversation. And it's hard to relate to people. So you really have to work on your character if you want to be a coach. You have to find all of those sensitive areas, everything that triggers you, and get rid of it and deal with it. Because when you're working with a client, you need to be so present with them and so compassionate and empathetic, and really step into their world. And if you have all of these issues around you, it's going to be hard to connect with them. So character is a big thing that we look at. And the process itself, the coaching training process that we do, is really a character building process. You're really strengthening yourself from the inside out in all areas of life. And that's where the confidence is going to come through too, is like knowing I have transformed my stuff. And I'm not like, no one's perfect. And it's not like you get to this point where it's like, okay, I'm done. I've done all the work. But it's like you get in this process where when my stuff comes up, I notice it right away, and I'm able to identify it and shelve it. If I'm in the coaching conversation, I'm like, ooh, that just triggered me what the client said. I'm going to take that. I'm going to scoot that over here because that doesn't belong in this session. I'll get to it later. I get off the call. I go look at that and I work on that. So you get into a practice of dealing with this stuff as it comes up. So character strength is huge. When I look at our senior coaches and I look at who is successful, they're people who they're personable, they're friendly, they're warm. They're people that are so compassionate that when you sit with them, you're just like, you feel like you could tell them anything, and you feel like you're loved by them, and they care about you. There's this genuineness around them. In the reverse, we've had coaches that are really passionate. They want to get their practice off the ground, but they're edgy, and there's a lot of friction around them, and they're just like, they're really defensive, and they're always like taking things personal. And it's hard to train you to be a good coach when all those those negative characteristics are in the way. So character is what we look at. Number one, most companies are going to look at credentials first. We look at character first. The next is communication. Communication is really huge, because here coaching is communication, right? All of it is there's multiple forms of communication. There's verbal communication, written communication, body language, eye contact, tone of voice. There's the energetic communication, the communication even of what's in my environment. If I have a lot of loud, noisy things in my environment, just that is communicating that I don't really care about my client that much, because I didn't even, mind the things in my own room. So communication is really important. Mostly we're looking at, verbal communication, this energetic communication, because that's what coaching is. I mean, it's a conversation. You're having a conversation between coach and client. So you need to be articulate. You need to be to the point. You need to be concise. You need to be listening more than you're talking. You need to be able to track what they're saying and really follow what they're saying and not get caught up on some tangent that they mention that isn't the point. You have to be able to track, like, what's the point? Then you have to be able to reflect that back with empathy and be able to provide good responses and powerful questions to keep the conversation going. So we look for people who have good communication. These are all things that you can learn as a coach. You can strengthen your character. You can build on your communication skills. And then the credentials piece is like, you got to practice. You really have to be dedicated. You have to get the right training for the audience you want to work with. And that's different. Like, our training is very comprehensive and full spectrum, and anybody could go through our training and come out a really good coach. And then from there, if you want to, further niche, maybe you find another training or books that you're reading, and then you're practicing in that nature. And then I would say, if I were to add something else, which would probably just fall under character, is like the logistical management of things. To be a good coach, you have to be good at invoicing and paperwork and software to some degree, technology. There's a lot of things that people get caught up on, which are like I said, a lot of the logistical stuff. And sometimes people are just like, oh, I'm not good at that. I'm a really good coach, but I'm not good at those things. We got to be good at them. You got to be a professional. If you want to be taking people's money and you want to really help them, you have to write professional text, professional emails. You have to be able to track every session and track like what you're talking about in the homework and follow these things. So we have systems in Being True to You now that support all of this. However, it's a practice. So most of the stuff you can learn and you can train on, but that's what we're looking for when we're talking about, a good coach. And a coach that wants to, and this goes to character too and credentials, a coach that wants to keep learning, keep growing, can take feedback, get supervision, seeks mentorship on their cases. So things like that.
I don't remember when it was, maybe 4 years ago that I did Being True to You. And the name itself, there was one point, sometimes you sign up for a program and that it's good. I knew Dr. Dan Engel and I had heard about you, so I signed up for this program. And it was so interesting. I think it was like halfway in that all of a sudden the name, Being True to You, I kind of caught myself laughing because I started to realize, wait, I'm the one in the transformational process, and this is actually me learning how to be true. And I was just noticing the aspects going through the program that I was transforming within myself. And it was kind of funny. I was like, wait a second. It's kind of like a wink, wink of the universe. It was kind of like being true to you. Wait, this is about me. And just noticing the kind of the transformation that I needed to go through in areas that I didn't know yet. So that was kind of a interesting piece about being true to you for me. How much would you say that neutrality plays into being a good coach?
Well, first off, imagine how I felt when I named my company Being True to You. And then the next decade, I just had to consistently experience the heartbreak that I'm not being true to me. I thought, oh, this is a cool name. And it just makes so much sense because I'm totally being true to myself. But I'm like, nope, you have layers and layers and years of work to do to get to the authentic, true self. And so it's been quite a journey for me. So yes, it's fun when other people discover that in the training, when they're like, oh, I'm doing the work. And that's what makes me a good coach. So I love that you said that. And I love your next question too. There's a lot of discoveries that we've had. It's like a tree trunk or an onion. People use these different metaphors to understand like the human experience and our process of cultivation. I think of it like a tree trunk, there's so many different layers, and it's important to understand it that way because sometimes symptoms come up and challenges come up that feel of the past, like, oh, I already resolved that. I thought I was done with that. It's coming back up again. And it's like, no, maybe it's a new layer. You've gotten deeper. You're doing the work. You're moving forward. You're not going back. It's not that you fell into something, an old thing. It's a new thing. You're getting deeper into those layers. And I think that perspective really helps clients who feel like, oh my gosh, my cravings are coming up again. My sadness and my loneliness is coming up again. What I did isn't working. It's all coming back. And then you think, no, it is working, because you're getting to the root of that loneliness now. You've been working on the symptoms of it. You're getting deeper and deeper. What you're doing is working. Keep going. So yeah, I really like that too. So regarding your question around neutrality, it's thank you for asking that question. There's so many discoveries that we've had working in, psychedelic integration coaching and transformational recovery coaching. We really get to look at the human experience and the human predicament much deeper, I think, than a lot of our modern conventional human service systems are really looking at things. And that's what psychedelics do, is look at humans through this multidimensional perspective. And we start to see there's a lot to unpack there. So there's a number of tenets that we have come to practice within our coaching atmosphere to protect the space around each client. And one of those is neutrality. So neutrality came about several years ago, mostly with all the division in society. I mean, I think a decade ago, when I was training to be a counselor, there wasn't so many controversial issues. Like there was, but they didn't really come up in conversation. And so it was easier to, it seemed like everyone kind of had more of a similar foundation in which they were counseling people and coaching people. And then, you fast forward to today, and there's so many controversial issues, and there's such a divide between left and right, and spiritual people and religious people, and, conservatives and liberals. And it's like, then there's all of these issues in between that come out. And what happens is that it's really easy for the coach to try to insert themselves into the client's life without knowing it. And so what we realized and it goes way further than like political differences, right? But that's when it really was highlighted for us, is like, oh my gosh, we can't have coaches telling the clients how to think. Like the whole thing around psychedelic therapies and integration coaching is that you're thinking for yourself, you're processing things for yourself, and you are coming to conclusions on your own. And so neutrality basically just means that you're being unbiased and you are stepping into the client's world. You're not using the coaching platform as a soapbox or advocacy to push your own beliefs. So you're not getting into your own spiritual beliefs, your own political beliefs, your own really perspectives on any particular issue. Your job is to help the client understand what they believe on a particular issue. And so it's actually been really great connective for our community, because, some years ago I thought, gosh, like these divisions in society are tearing like so many companies and families apart and industries apart. Like, how are we going to stick together? And someone told me, one of my former coaches, a good friend of mine, he said, Deanne, think about 12 steps. He said they've been around almost 100 years and they've never gotten involved in anything political. And they only stay focused on helping people in their recovery. That's it. It's the 12 steps, and it's community, and that's it. And there's no other conversations are coming in, and it's really neutral, and it's been working for this long. And I thought to myself, yes, that's what we need to do. We need to focus on transformation, doing the work, the interpersonal work, and let people be wherever they are. If they're talking about, aliens and what's going on in outer space, great, let them. Whether you believe that or not doesn't matter, because what matters is that that's where their consciousness is right now. If they're processing something that is very controversial, like it could be vaccines, or whether or not to take antidepressants and birth control, or whether or not to get a divorce or an abortion, or whether or not to, make these other really big life-changing decisions, as a coach, you have to stay neutral on those things. And you have to ask the client, what's important to you? What stands out for you in this? What do you think around this? So there's so much I could say around the topic of neutrality, but in general, we train our coaches to be neutral, and it's working. And the clinics that we work with, the medical clinics, they notice, they see it, because anytime you go hire a psychedelic integration coach that like hasn't been through training off the street, a lot of times they're going to come in with a lot of energy and passion. And passion can be advocacy, which can be very pushy for people. And I think a lot of people are picking up like the work of a coach so that they can change people's mind. And we have to be very careful around this because psychedelics are very powerful and they're very miraculous and profound in what they can do. But there's a dark side to them too. And one of that is that people are easily susceptible to new ways of thinking about things. And so it's not that hard to use psychedelics to change a person's worldview or their perspectives and their beliefs. And there is even a conscious agenda, I would say, within the psychedelic community to do just that, to use psychedelics to open people up to a new reality and to change the way that people think. And I call that mind control. So I think the neutrality and being true to you is going to set the stage for the industry and the movement wide, I hope, to say, no, we don't want to do that. We actually want to help people identify what's sacred within them. And for a lot of people, that is their religion, that is their connection to God. And those are things that are sort of being attacked underneath the psychedelic movement. So I am a little passionate about neutrality because I think it's really important that we help people be true to themselves. And that means we help them go within and say, what is my core value system? What are my guiding principles in life? What's most important to me? What's my foundation for even assessing what is true or not? And the coach is just holding space. They're not triggered. They're not moved. They're not trying to influence the client a certain direction. They're not leaving subtle little seeds to plant in the person's consciousness so that they'll start to, change the way that they think. They're actually just holding the space for the person to find their own truth and their own values. And even if you're like working with a client and what they're saying is not good for them. I've worked with clients that their ideas are very grandiose and I'm just like, no, that's not good for them. I know it's not, but you still hold space for them in that moment where they are in their current level of consciousness, because that's what walks them to the next level, is that you're there with no judgment, no bias, no agenda. So the neutrality aspect is really important. And if we want psychedelic therapies and things like integration coaching to be more accessible to the national, populace, these are the things we really have to mind in our ethics, is showing up and being a container for compassion and non-judgment, empathy and guidance and support and talking through things, a container to get to the truth, all of those things, but we're not putting our own thoughts, beliefs, ideologies into the coaching session. And even worse, a lot of times what coaches will do is they're speaking to their current trend, whatever book they're currently reading, whatever program they're currently reading, whatever's like fresh on their mind. They haven't even fully integrated it. It's all this new stuff. Those are the things that they want to seed into the client's journey. And I've done it. I started, counseling over 15 years ago, and I started being true to you 13 years ago. I've done it. I'm guilty of all those things. And that's how I know not to do it. So yeah, does that answer your question on neutrality? There's a lot we could say there.
I think it's just so important, the neutrality, but also a couple of things that you mentioned, even like meeting somebody where they are. I think psychedelics have a good way of doing that sometimes, like just meeting the person, what they're ready for, where they are. Not especially in the climate that we're in. Neutrality is so important. You've been in this space long enough to witness a lot of things, and you pointed to, one of the shadows of psychedelics. What is your hope for this space? You were talking about that tree and how a lot of times, a lot of the behaviors, whether it's addiction or some of the symptoms that people are living with in their life, in the middle is that core of the why, that kind of shadow maybe that has to get really looked at and gone into. What would you say is your hope for psychedelics in making change or helping people with this transformation? And what would you say is the shadow within the psychedelic space?
I think psychedelic plant medicine, substances have been on our earth since the beginning of time. I mean, I've gone into history and I've really looked at the waves of psychedelics and how they've kind of come in and, they're trendy, they're popular, then they kind of go away. And then they come back. And so it's not new. So sometimes we think like these are new discoveries. In my research, I don't find any of it to be new. I find psychedelic molecules and psychoactive substances to be with us throughout our human experience. And so there seems to be something there. There seems to be a relevance there and an applicability to our human experience and to understanding our predicament as humans and our human suffering. And I think when we get really locked into our illusion and the matrix, and we sort of lose touch with our spiritual side. I mean, half people don't even believe in the spiritual side anymore, because that's how closed in we are into our into this like material world matrix. And I feel like psychedelics come in and they just like blow all of that open. And so I don't use psychedelics anymore in my practice. I have a meditation practice that I use, but I continue to see the benefit of psychedelics. So what I would like to see is that these things are held in a sovereign container, and I don't really know what the future is going to be, what the legalization will be and the permissions granted will be. Mm-hmm. I just am, if I were an advocate for anything, I would be an advocate for sovereignty around these medicines. So I'm not really huge on, getting them legalized, because I know they're going to be turned over to big pharma, and I know what big pharma is capable of. And so it's a little bit scary when you give molecules like this to laboratories like that, who are like, oh my gosh, we can actually make a happy pill. So I think that there is going to be those things that we see where there's a happy pill coming around. And then I think we just kind of repeat the same thing that we've been doing, of trying to find an external solution, trying to rectify a situation without having to take responsibility for ourselves. So my vision and mission is to create a sovereign container around psychedelic therapies where people can help people through this process versus institutions helping people per se, and where they can be used as a container for someone to go in and pure, like we need the purity of the medicine, right? We can't start mixing it with all of these different pharmaceutical grade compounds that nobody understands and nobody knows what it is. And then the heavy metals get in there, and then who knows what's in there, right? And then they become addicting. And so what's really nice when we just have these pure organic substances that are treated as sacraments, and people have freedom to use them in different ways. They can be used in indigenous circles. They could be used in spiritual churches. They could be used in backyard experiences. They can be used among friends and neighbors, and people just learn about them. People understand how precious they are and how dangerous they are as well. And then if the medical system is like, hey, we want this too, great, bring it into the psychotherapy room as well, but bring it in with integrity and bring it in with sovereignty. And by that, you're being very careful that we're not getting into this realm of mind control. We're not leveraging psychedelics for profit. We're really allowing them, the people, to have freedom to use these things. So, and then, we continue to raise the standards around it, and we honor different people's view of it. Some people want to use them recreationally, great. Some people want to use them for therapeutic reasons, great. Some people are using them for really big, like spiritual awakening experiences, great. I think that we do have a right as humans to do that, but we have to have the honest conversation around it. And we don't want to go to extremes either. We don't want to go to an extreme of like, psychedelics are going to save the world and everybody needs to take psychedelics. It's disappointing when I hear people say about all the people that disagree with them, let's give them all psychedelics and wake them up and make them think like I do. That's mind control. So we don't want to start doing that. We don't want to start imposing psychedelic therapies on the rest of the world and telling everybody else that like they need to do it. It's a personal decision, and it should remain a personal decision. It should not be something like family members are pushing their kids to do it, or kids are pushing their parents to do it. It's a very individual decision, and people should be educated, well-informed, do their own due diligence. And, from there, then they can make good decisions. And then, there'll probably be some kind of standardization, accountability forum for facilitators and things like that. But those are probably my thoughts, if I had to say, is that we use psychedelics as a tool and a catalyst for the work. But doing psychedelics is not the work itself. That is not going to save people itself. There's only so far you can get with psychedelics. I mean, a lot of the thought leaders early on died young. A lot of people in psychedelics died in their 60s of heart attacks. And when I look at like my meditation practice, for instance, there's most of the people are 100 years old. I mean, 90s. There's so many people in their 90s and over 100 in my meditation practice who've never taken a psychedelic. They don't even have wrinkles on their face. And I'm just like, okay, let's just look at the long-term results here. Psychedelics wear people out. They wear people down. If you really look at it, the industry, people age very fast. And yeah, they have a lot of breakthroughs, but if we're outsourcing our own work to psychedelics and we just worship them, we keep going back in there and we keep thinking that it's going to be a panacea, I think it will be counterproductive. And I think that we'll miss the opportunity. If we have a good relationship with psychedelics and we say, it's my job to fix me, it's my job to cultivate me, it's my job to fix things, but I'm going to use this or that tool, such as a psychedelic therapy, to help me do it, then I think that's within integrity. And I think that then we're respecting the medicine. Even the medicine will tell people, no, no, no. Like when you abuse it and you go in, it'll say no. You know, I've had multiple people tell me that when they go in, the psychedelic experience, like, no, 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 you're done. So, I mean, I think that we have to use them within reason, and our relationship to psychedelics, you know, needs to be sovereign and sacred.
I love the principles that you really carry with you. Obviously, you know, it's your authenticity, your own integrity, the way you show up in the world, the training program that you've created that has truly an integral approach to transformation, and kind of, yeah, the character building, the principles that you have really infused. It's like obvious they come from your own deep work. And I know you have a new program starting in the fall. So for anybody, I'm sure you get a lot of people because of the excitement about psychedelics saying, I want to be a psychedelic integration coach. I know you have a program coming up in the fall. So if you want to speak to kind of what that is, and for anybody that is maybe kind of curious about it, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, please check us out. Come to our website, beingtruetoyou.com. Check out the coach training. Give us a call. We'll talk to you about it. We have 10 years experience training over 1,000 coaches. We are the first company of our kind, and still the only company of our kind in the world, who has been providing psychedelic integration coach training and certifications. There's more popping up over the last year or two, which, you know, I'm sure there's some good programs coming out. A lot of them are really niche in a particular area, where we have a really full, comprehensive, full spectrum program, as I was saying, that anyone could step into, whether you're wanting to be a coach, a sitter, an entrepreneur, a facilitator, if you're just wanting to understand this work a little bit better. Any kind of stakeholders in the psychedelic arena are coming into our training because they just want to know what the ins and outs are of this work and how to really, truly help. You can't just open a clinic and give people medicines and expect miracles and changes per se, at least not on a consistent basis, if you don't have a solid integration program. So what I would say is that there are thousands of new clinics opening up, psychedelic clinics, wellness clinics, transformational clinics. The current clinics are transforming themselves, and they all need integration coaches. So right now, I think that integration coaching is going to be the fastest growing and most needed profession in our country and in other countries, because the model directly parallels the process, the natural and organic process of personal growth and spiritual development, because you're guiding a person to do the work for themselves. And so everyone, everywhere, individuals need coaches, programs need coaches, and we have a really good program. It's all online. It's 5.5 months long. Our next one starts early September. So we do them every fall and every spring. But the next one starts early September, so there's just a couple weeks left to sign. We would love to talk to you, hear about you, and just go over what your vision is, what your mission is, to make sure it's a good fit for you, and then we can get you into the program. From there, you'll have access to our whole community, all of our resources and tools, our whole process, our expert instructors and senior coaches to go through both the educational and instructional side of things, and then the experiential and practice side of things. And by the time you're done with the training, you know, you'll have all your materials, you'll have all of your action steps, you'll have already been practice coaching, you'll have a good idea of what your own niche will be and what your unique format or style will be, and it'll change your life. It'll change your life on a personal and professional level.
Who do you feel that Being True to You supports?
You know, when you're building a business, you always want to be something to someone and not try to be everything to everyone. But somehow we've just kind of developed that, because there's so many different demographics that have sought out psychedelic therapies and transformational experiences, that we work with all demographics. So I think we're one of those unique companies. We work with people who want to take situations in their life, such as adversity, hardship, challenge, addictions, any kind of like mental issues where you just feel stuck on it. And we take those experiences and we transform them into something good. And so you're using these situations and different states of suffering as a launching pad for good. So anybody who's just like, I'm so tired of being X, Y, Z, because I think there's issues that we have in life, and then there's like the one condition that really sits with us for all of life. And so for people who are just like, I'm done trying to find the answer and taking every medicine and searching for the best professional and going all over the world to solve my problems, I'm ready to just do the work, because you don't have to spend a lot of money and travel the world and do every technique out there to heal. You have to do the work. There is no escaping it. And so I think for people that are just at that place of like, okay, I'm ready to do the work, come to us, we can help. And for some people, they're kind of sitting in a good position too. It's like, I've been doing the work for a long time, and I'm just ready for that next level, whether it's next career level, next level in family and marriage and with your children, or finding your spiritual purpose. I would say that there's a lot of depth to our program. So people who feel that calling to see what more does life have to offer, and to understand the human experience outside of conventional thinking and sort of the material world matrix and the conditioning that we're under, because we're all under it. We're under this like spell, this like this programming, these conditioning to see our world and ourselves and our purpose in life in a certain way. And it's not true. The material world thinking has a ceiling on healing and a ceiling on growth. And so if you're ready to kind of crack that door open and be like, who am I as a human being and a soul? What is my mission here? I know that I can do more, whether I'm just cultivating my own character, whether I'm serving, my community better. These are the kinds of things that we do through our coaching. So anybody who's interested in doing this work, we work with all levels in society. We work with, people that are just getting started, and we work with professionals, we work with entrepreneurs, we work with celebrities. I mean, we're honored, I would just say, for all the people we work with. And because we've trained so many coaches, we have a coach in every demographic. So what we're known for is our matching system. We're really good at matching. So when people come in, we get to know them, and then we can match them.
I was just thinking that you're probably a great matchmaker.
It's fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And that's really what it comes down to when you're looking for a coach, is finding that perfect person. And that's what we're really good at. So yeah, people that want coaching, people that want training, or people that are running businesses. If you have a psychedelic therapy program, a wellness program, and you don't have a preparation integration set up, give us a call. We can talk to you about simple ways that you can start to bring that system together, or even look at the bigger picture with you and how to scale. So lots of conversations we can have with people throughout this industry.
It's so inspiring, really. Your work is incredibly inspiring. And, if I hadn't experienced it firsthand, I wouldn't really know the depths of which it has changed my life, but then also the tools and what I learned from the Being True to You program has, it then goes on to change other people's lives as well. So thank you so much, because as a woman and as an, entrepreneur, starting something like that is a massive amount of work. And through that, you are touching so many lives through your different coaches. And I want to just honor the work that you're doing in this space and the integrity in which you're doing it with.
Thank you, Michaela, so much. I really appreciate you saying that. I'm so happy you went through our training too, because it's hard to explain. You really have to go through it to experience it. And that's what we realized later on, was like, wow, our program is bigger than any psychedelic experience. So we had to start doing prep and integration just for our program for people. But yeah, thank you for saying that. As an entrepreneur, you get stuck in the weeds and you get stuck in like just the madness and chaos of everything. And so sometimes you have to step back and say like, okay, what are the yields here? And just sit with that. And it feels really good. So I appreciate you saying that. I just want you to know I feel the same about you. It's an honor to meet you. I'm so happy you came through our training and into our community, and that you've started this podcast, and that you're giving a voice for people to come and share what their discoveries are in this line of work and what their advice is for other people stepping into this work, because there's a lot of trial and error for companies like mine when we get into this work, and not everybody has to make all of those errors. If we all just talk about it together, it's like we can structure this in a much more safe and effective and ethical, effective way when we work together. So thank you for putting this podcast together and all that you do.
Well, I would love to have you back. I saw so many threads that I still want to pick on. So hopefully you'll come back and we'll dive deeper in some of the, your own personal journeys and what more you're seeing in this space. So I'd love to have you back at some point.
Fantastic. So yeah, best way to reach us, beingtruetoyou.com. We have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, we have a LinkedIn page. So if you like social media, you can go through those avenues, or you could just come right to our website. From there, you can call our hotline, or you can reach out to our administration email. Either way, you'll get a call back or an email back right away, and we'll chat with you about your ideas, your vision, your mission, your projects, or your concern, your tragedy, whatever it is that you're working through or working on.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Deanne. And we will see you back here at some point.